Hey, what's up, guys? This is Benny Ricciardi with rotocurve.com, and I'm here with our Benny's Bat section for Monday, May 23rd. It's a 9-game slate for Monday night for MLB DFS, so let's get right into it. Oh, and it is a Clayton Kershaw day, by the way, so you can see that I'm happy because you know who I'm going to be starting. First game we're going to look at, excuse me, New York Mets going up against the Washington Nationals. Got Gio Gonzalez on the mound for the Nationals, and this is actually a pretty good spot for him. Right-handed bats have been the ones that have a higher average against them, and he's been pretty tough on lefties, and he also has a low home run rate. Looking at this Mets lineup, they do not hit left-handed pitching particularly well. David Wright is good against lefties, 380 WOBA, 194 ISO score, and Yoenis Cespedes is the only other guy who I'd really be a little bit concerned with. 358 WOBA for him, 250 ISO. He has 4 of 7 lifetime against Gio Gonzalez with a home run, so those would be the two guys that I would be looking to use to attack, Gio would be those two right-handers. Other than that, though, all these other lefties that the Mets have in their lineup do not really profile all that well. They could decide to go kind of right-handed against Gio here, but the right-handed bats that they bring in aren't really all that great. So, guys like Granderson, guys like Conforto, guys like Walker and Duda, none of these guys are really on my radar today. I don't think it's a good matchup for any of them. On the other side of this game, we got Bartolo Colon pitching. Normally, I guess left-handed bats are the ones that do better against them, but right-handed bats have been okay this year too, which isn't really a good sign against this Washington team. I mean, if you're looking at the lefties, Harper stands out, obviously. 464 WOBA, 343 ISO, 3 of 13 lifetime with a home run against Colon. You also have Daniel Murphy, who doesn't have a lot of history against Colon since they were teammates for a while. But 370 WOBA for him, 206 ISO score. He's still batting pretty high this year. And remember, we talked about it last time. If you're asking me, at this point in time, teams are just walking Harper. So with Murphy hitting behind him, Murphy's the guy that's actually in a little bit of a better spot because he's getting up every single time he's getting up. He's got guys on base, which means that if he does hit a home run, it's a 2-run or a 3-run shot. He's got Harper on first who can steal second and put himself in scoring position. There's a lot of different things that can happen here, but it seems like Murphy's been the guy who's producing better because teams just aren't pitching to Harper, and I mean, rightfully so. This guy's been an absolute monster this year. So just keep that in mind. If you can only afford to spend up for one of the two, I still actually like Murphy as the guy that I'd spend up for, more because of opportunity than talent, but either way, he's the guy that's been producing more fantasy points. Next game, we can talk about Philly against Detroit. We got another really good pitcher going in this one in Vincent Velasquez. He's been lights out to right-handed batters. 198 batting average, .99 whip against them. This team has all right-handers on it from top to bottom, so it's not a good matchup at all for Detroit. The two guys that hit really well for Detroit in righty-on-righty matchups, Miguel Cabrera, 407 WOBA, 204 ISO, and J.D. Martinez, 364 WOBA, 244 ISO. Velasquez has been a very good pitcher this year. Like I said, I'm not a big fan of Detroit in this matchup because he's really tough on right-handers. This offense can explode. We've seen him put up runs against, guys like Strasburg and Joe Ross recently, some really good right-handers who are tough on righties as well. I don't know if I really want to take out any Detroit bets here, but I'm also not sure if I'm going to take Velasquez at the high price, knowing that this offense does have some explosiveness in it. On the other side of this game, Detroit's pitching Mike Pelfrey. He did have a good start the last time out, but both right and left-handed bats hit over 300 against him last year, and not even just last year. I mean, 2-3 years, last couple years, both sides of the plate have pretty much hit him hard. The problem is this isn't a very explosive Philly offense, so I don't know how many guys you really want to throw in there. I do like Odubel Herrera, 354 WOBA, 135 ISO score. Also has some stolen base upside against Saltalamacchia. So I do think that, Odubel could be one of those guys that we could look at here. Other than that, I mean, you probably want to look at left-handed bats, but maybe a guy like, Miguel Franco. If he's still cheap, maybe a guy like Tommy Joseph, who could be a catcher or first base option for you. But there's not a lot of guys that really stand out on the numbers. This Philly team is not really high scoring. They have been playing well, so I don't want to knock them, but it has a lot to do with the pitching. They're really only getting about, maybe 3 or 4 runs a game at most. So I don't think there's a lot of upside here with this offense. Next game, we can talk about Tampa Bay at Miami. You got Wei-Yin Chen pitching for Miami, the lefty. 270 batting averages to righties, about a home run every 6 innings or so. And the Rays have been, beating up left-handed pitching lately. They got a lot of guys that have some pop against lefties. Looking at guys like Evan Longoria, 386 WOBA, 225 ISO. Brandon Guyer, 382 WOBA, 187 ISO. They have always hit left-handed pitching well. And then now you've added in guys that are extending that lineup. A guy like Steve Pearce, second base eligible, still pretty cheap, 346 WOBA, 235 ISO for him. Steven Souza, who led the game off with a home run the other day, hits very well against left-handed pitching, 343 WOBA, 216 ISO score for him. So you can see he's got some pop. Miami's not the easiest place to hit a home run out of, but those four guys right there have very, very good numbers against left-handed pitching. The problem that we have here, though, and you'll hear people say this today, Wei-Yin Chen is not a great pitcher, but he's not horrible either. He's not a guy that ever really gets lit up. His bad starts are maybe like 4 or 5 runs over 6 innings or so. So I don't know if there's a ton of upside here, but I definitely do want to have exposure here and there to some of the pieces on this Tampa Bay team, because like we said, this Tampa Bay team has been mashing left-handed pitching lately. So I do think you want to have some of these guys. On the other side of the game, we got Matt Moore pitching for Tampa Bay. Right-handed bats have a higher average against him. Stanton's the guy that stands out the most, 450 WOBA, 457 ISO. And you'll hear people who just look at the numbers tell you how great of a play Stanton is today. Stanton has struck out 15 of his last 17 at-bats. He's basically been 0 for about 5 straight games. I think he broke it yesterday with like a single in the 4th inning or something like that. But this is not a guy who's on a hot streak right now. So I know he stands out based on the numbers, but I am very, very weary of using him. I don't know if he's hurt. I don't know what's going on. Somebody said something yesterday that he's having trouble seeing the ball, like legitimately seeing the ball. I mean, he did get hit in the head last year, so I don't really know. I know that, numbers-wise, he stands out as like the top play on the day with the, his WOBA and his ISO score. But again, I'm really weary about a guy who has 15 strikeouts in his last 17 at-bats. That doesn't tell me that he's seeing the ball well right now or that everything is right with Stanton. So, just be forewarned that, it might not be as easy a spot for him as you think it is. 2 other guys I think we can look at. Marcell Ozuna, 412 WOBA, 216 ISO against left-handed pitching. Those are almost elite level numbers. I'd like to see that ISO score be a little bit higher before I call them elite, but a 412 WOBA is a 412 WOBA. I mean, there aren't many guys who have WOBAs over 400 against any handedness of pitcher, so I do think that he's in play. DraftKings jacked him up to $5,000 though, so I don't really know if I can pay that kind of a price for him, but I do think he's in a pretty good spot here, and he would definitely be included in any stacks that I make of the Marlins today. You got a guy like Martin Prado, 360 WOBA, 117 ISO. Not a lot of upside, but does hit left-handed pitching well, so he could be a solid, cash game play. Might be able to get you a couple hits. And then I also like to catch a JT Realmuto today. He had been hitting left-handed pitching really well, and even led off for them against left-handed pitching for a couple games about a week or 2 ago. I'm not really sure how this lineup's going to work out. I mean, Ichiro's been doing a great job getting hits on top of this lineup, but I don't know if they're going to start him as a leadoff hitter in the lefty-on-lefty situation. But if Yelich is out, he'll probably be in the lineup too. If Realmuto is batting like in the 1st or the 2nd spot in the order, I think he's definitely somebody I want to have some exposure to. He's the same $3,500 price as Buster Posey today, and he has a much, much softer matchup. Next game we can talk about, the LA Angels are going up against the Texas Rangers. Nick Tropiano is on the mound for the Angels, and I know everybody loves this guy, but I don't know. I don't see the upside. He's not like a huge strikeout guy, never really pitches deep into the games. He does have some strikeout ability. I don't want to say he doesn't have any, but he's just not a guy who I'm going to roster all that often. I actually don't mind taking some bets against him. Left-handed bats this year are hitting over 300 against them. They hit over 270 against them last year, so left-handers are definitely the way I want to attack them. Shin-Soo Choo came back but left the game early. Don't know if he's going to be playing in this game or not. If he is, then I think he's viable. I hope he doesn't, because that would mean that, they move Nomar Mazara up in the order. Last game, Mazara hit like 7th when Choo played. Without Choo, he moved up to 5th. He was hitting in the 3 spot earlier in the year. If he's towards the top of the order, I love this guy because he's still cheap. 372 WOBA, 185 ISO. Like I said, it all really depends on the lineup spot. If he's hitting 7th, I like him a lot less. If he's hitting 5th, I like him because he's in an RBI spot. If he's hitting 3rd, I love him because he's in an RBI spot and could score runs. And if for some chance they decide to lead him off again like they did earlier in the year, I think that's a viable place for him as well. His price is still pretty cheap. Definitely like this kid. He's a really good young hitter. You could also look at Rougned Odor if his suspension isn't starting. I have no idea when that is going to start for, him throwing the right cross at, Jose Bautista the other day. But again, the left-handed bats are the way we want to go. I don't really love Fielder or Moreland. Haven't been playing either one of them much this year. Fielder kind of lacks the pop, more of a cash game play, I guess, if you really had to. But I think there are other guys priced down there that you'd rather look at today. On the other side, we got Derek Holland, a lefty pitching. Right-handed bats are hitting 270 against him, 13 home runs in 81 innings. So, definitely somebody that can give up the long ball as well. Mike Trout stands out the most, 409 WOBA, 247 ISO. Escobar actually has pretty good numbers too, 358 WOBA, 127 ISO, batting in front of Trout. He's going to see a lot of good pitches. Pujols has a little bit of home run upside, although he's better in righty on righty spots. I think CJ Cron's got some power. He could be a sneaky guy to look at here. People have been playing the catcher Perez lately, not really somebody that's high up on my list, but I think there are some right-handed bats you can look at against Holland. That's usually the way you want to attack them. And this Angels team does have a lot of right-handed bats, so I think they could make it a tough day for him. Next game we're going to look at, Next game we're going to look at Kansas City at Minnesota. Ian Kennedy on the mound for Kansas City. We're going to look at his numbers against right-handed bats. They've actually had a higher average against them the last 3 years, kind of a reverse splits pitcher, which is not a good thing for him against this Minnesota team because you got a lot of right-handed bats in this Minnesota team. The three that stand out well based on the numbers and what they've been doing recently, Eduardo Nunez, 368 WOBA, 144 ISO, shortstop and third base eligible. I feel like this guy's kind of going under the radar, but he's a good play. He can get on base for you. He can steal a base for you. He can score a couple runs. And again, righty on righty, he does pretty well. And, it's something that Kennedy has struggled with. Minnesota is a little bit better than it's not a great hitter's park, but it's better than neutral. So it is favoring hitters a little bit. So I do think that you can take some of these guys against Kennedy, who does have a home run problem. He's been giving up a lot of home runs over the last couple of years. Because he has a home run problem, I also really like Miguel Sanu, 367 WOBA, 238 ISO, and then Byung-Ho Park, 359 WOBA, 303 ISO, which is really huge. Both of these guys have big power from the right side, and like we said, Kennedy has a home run problem. Right-handed bats have hit for a higher average against them, and he's been pretty equally distributing home runs to both right and left-handed bats at a pretty high rate. So I think that those guys that have some pop could be in play. You could even go down to guys like Brian Dozier, who has some pop, maybe even a Trevor Plouffe. All these right-handers, I think, that could put the ball over the fence are guys that you want to look at. I don't mind stacking up Minnesota. I know Kennedy had some pretty good numbers at the beginning of the year, but now that home run problem is starting to come back, if he walks a guy or gives up a hit or two and then gives up a home run, I could see two or three run shots coming out of this game. He gave up 2 home runs either the last game or the game before that. And like I said, it's been a problem for him his entire career. On the other side of this game, we got Ricky Nolasco. Both right and left-handed bats have hit him pretty hard over the last 3 or 4 years. Looking at some of the guys who actually have some decent numbers against them, there's a lot of BVP. Eric Hosmer, 391 WOBA, 195 ISO, probably the best bat there. 5 of 14 lifetime against Nolasco, so he's hitting over 300. You got a guy like Mike Moustakas, 350 WOBA, 192 ISO, just came back from the DL on Saturday, so just be careful. I'm not sure if he's completely back into the swing yet. He's 4 for 17 lifetime, which isn't really all that great against Nolasco, but he does have 2 home runs. So he has been one of those guys that's been able to take him deep. I would only use Moose as a GPP play today. I do think as a GPP play, he has the upside to hit a home run, but I don't think I'm, really expecting him to go like 3 for 4 or anything like that and, help you out in cash. You can also look at guys like Alex Gordon, maybe even a Kendry Morales. Gordon's 5 of 18 lifetime against Nolasco with 3 doubles. So those are okay numbers. Morales, nothing special against them, but, he's been so bad this year. I haven't used him at all, so I'm probably not going to start today either. Next game we can look at Chicago Cubs at the St. Louis Cardinals. John Lackey pitching for the Cubs. The last 3 years, left-handed bats have been a tad better, about a 260 average. Right-handed bats have been about 240. It's not bad, but it's also not exactly great. I don't think he's lights out. In 2016, he's been very good. He's got a 3.31 ERA. He's got a whip of 0.98, and he has 52 strikeouts in like 56 innings or something like that. Carpenter is one guy who I do want to take against him. 395 WOBA, 262 ISO. And then after that, you're kind of looking at like the right-handed bats, which I think are a little bit weaker against them. But maybe a guy like Gearchuk, a guy like Holiday, a guy like Piscotty. I think some of these guys could be in play. There aren't a ton of left-handed bats that really scare me on this St. Louis team. I mean, you're probably going to have Matt Holliday, not Matt Holliday. You're probably going to have Matt Adams or, I don't even remember who the other guy is that they have. Oh, Brandon Moss or Matt Adams hitting cleanup. Again, if that's the second scariest left-handed bat, I'm not all that scared. I do think they get a couple hits off Lackey. Lackey probably has an okay start. He's not a guy that has huge upside for me, so I wouldn't pay up that price for him. But I also don't think I want a ton of bats against them, with the one exception kind of being Carpenter, who I think is too solid to ignore. On the other side of this game now, we got Adam Wainwright pitching. And I'm not going to look back at any of the past year stats for Wainwright because he hasn't been the same guy. Now, he did go out and pitch 6 shutout innings in his last game, but every other start he's had this year, he's gotten lit up for 3 or 4 runs. Right and left-handed bats are hitting him well, which is something that we don't usually see. And this Chicago offense is one of the best in the league. You got Anthony Rizzo, 391 WOBA, 269 ISO, 9 of 30 lifetime with the home run against Wainwright when Wainwright was actually pitching better. You got Chris Bryant, 380 WOBA, 215 ISO, had a monster home run on Saturday. Just absolutely jacked it dead center field. So he's another guy seeing the ball well, hitting the ball well. Dexter Fowler, Ben Zobrist, Hayward, even guys down to like Addison Russell, and Javier Baez. I mean, this entire lineup from top to bottom is a little bit scary. So, I don't think this is going to be an easy spot for Wainwright at all. I think people are looking at that cheap Wainwright price and remembering the guy from a couple years ago. They said something about him changing his arm angle. It's given the curveball a little more bite like he was used to having on it, but I'm still not convinced that he's going to come out and pitch a good game here. So I think you can look at these bats on Chicago. Next game we can talk about is an easy one. Cincinnati at the LA Dodgers. Clayton Kershaw's pitching. We're not looking at a single soul on Cincinnati. I think you're crazy if you even bother trying. All right, maybe you can go. No, I'm not even going to say maybe you can go. If you're using anybody on Cincinnati, it's purely a GPP play. It's purely because you're trying to be contrarian and you're probably wasting money. Clayton Kershaw is the best pitcher in the league, probably going to have another monster start today. There's an argument whether or not you can justify paying $14,000 for them, but there's no argument about whether or not you expect them to pitch well. It's just a matter of, does he have a dominant performance and pay off that salary, or does he just have a pretty good performance and only give you a solid score on that salary? So that's basically the analysis for Kershaw against Cincinnati. On the other side of the game, we got the left-handed Brendan Finnegan pitching. Right-handed bats have done better against him. He had a really good start to the year, but he's come back to earth right now. And he's been getting hit pretty hard by these right-handed bats. So, Kike Hernandez, if he gets in the lineup, 464 WOBA, 298 ISO against lefties since the start of 2015. Trace Thompson has been unreal, 407 WOBA, 308 ISO. I know it's a small sample size. I don't even think he has 100 at-bats in the last year and a half against left-handed pitching, but he's been absolutely smashing them. So Trace Thompson gets in the lineup. If he's in, maybe the 5 or the 6 spot in the order, definitely want to have some exposure to him. If he hits any higher up in the order, I still think he's in play. Corey Seager, even though it's lefty on lefty, shortstop, a little bit of a weak position, and Seager's been, really, really hot lately. 396 WOBA, 250 ISO, again, under 100 at-bats against left-handed pitching, so it's a small sample size, but he obviously can hit left-handed pitching. So him and Trace, I think, are 2 guys that I would have some exposure to. And then if you're looking for a cheap option, I know Justin Turner's better in righty on righty, but, he can still hit lefties a little bit too. He has been hitting out of the 3 hole lately for this Dodgers team. So I think Turner's another guy you can look at. And then even further on down the list, AJ Ellis hits left-handed pitching well. 371 WOBA since the start of 2015 against lefties. So AJ Ellis could be a cheap catching option you can look at as well. Next game is Oakland against Seattle. I kind of like Rich Hill here. I think he's good for a high strikeout number, even though I think he's an underdog in this game as well. Right-handed bats always do better against them, but even this year, right-handed bats are only hitting 201 against them with a 129 whip. So that's not even that great for him. And left-handed bats, he's been absolutely lights out too. So not a big fan of guys like Cano and Seager and Seth Smith, Aoki. All these left-handed bats, I'm not really looking for them to have a big game. There are 2 guys who do hit left-handed pitching really well on this team, though. You got Nelson Cruz with a 450 WOBA, 330 ISO. Those numbers are just absolutely enormous. So if you're not on Hill today, I think it definitely makes some sense to take a look at Cruz. I know some people try to tell you, oh, well, he's not that good against left-handed pitching. Well, you know what? The numbers say otherwise. So if you want to pretend that, oh, he's due for regression. Okay, well, you know what? Somebody tried to tell me the other day that, Jose Quintana is a horrible pitcher because he's due for regression. Well, guess what? If he kept pitching with a 1.42 ERA and a .88 WHIP for the entire season, he would be one of the best statistical pitchers in baseball history. Doesn't mean the guy's a bad play. Just because his numbers are eye-popping doesn't mean, people try to overthink this stuff. Oh, well, he's due for regression. No, if the numbers are eye-popping, what it means is he does really well in that situation. So, yeah, maybe those numbers will regress over time, but it's not like he's going to go out there and go 0 for 4 today because his numbers are so good against lefties and he's due for regression. That's just a stupid way to look at the whole situation. So, like I said, I do like Nelson Cruz. I do like Franklin Gutierrez as well. 397 WOBA, 269 ISO. Both of these guys hit left-handed pitching well. Rich Hill is a good pitcher. He's probably only going to go about 6 because he does walk guys and strike guys out. His pitch count tends to get kind of high. Never really goes deep into the game, but he can go 6 innings and wind up with like 9 or 10 strikeouts. But most of them, I think, are going to come against some of these left-handed bats. The righties, I think, are definitely guys you can put in there if you're not using Hill today. On the other side of this game, people love Taijuan Walker. He's been cheap. He's been really good at home this year. 2016, he's got a 2.95 ERA, a 1.13 WHIP, and 41 strikeouts in 42 innings. So you can't really argue with what he's done. And like we said, he's always been better at home. So it is a pretty good spot for him. The last 2 years, though, right-handed bats hit 310 against them in 2016, and they hit 250 against them in 2015. So reverse splits, righty on righty, kind of the way to go after him. The A's are not great against right-handed pitching in those situations, but they do have 2 guys that stand out. Danny Valencia, probably the best one, 364 WOBA, 237 ISO. Really solid hitter in the middle of that order, even in righty-on-righty situations. So I think you can look at him. The other guy that I would love to look at is Chris Davis, but he may not play. He's actually listed as day-to-day. I think he sat out the last game as well. 350 WOBA, 259 ISO score. So he has a ton of power in righty-on-righty matchups. I think he's got 13 home runs already this season, so we've seen him do it. He's another guy that I think we can look at here, but you got to make sure that he's in the lineup. Like I said, I don't remember if he sat out or if he left the last game early, but I did write a note down here that said, if he plays, which usually means to me that he's listed as like day-to-day or, he had some kind of injury that either kept him out or he got pulled from a game early. So just make sure he's in the lineup before you roll Chris Davis out there and make sure you're comfortable that they're saying he's, back to 100% and is going to be able to perform at a high level. The last game, we got a pitcher's duel, San Diego, San Francisco. We actually saw this exact same pitcher's duel last week, and Cueto was the one who was the winner. We got Johnny Cueto going up against Drew Pomeranz. Now, I would rather pay up for Kershaw. Cueto is very expensive today, but he's been very good, and he's pitched against San Diego twice. The San Diego team we know struggles with right-handed pitching. 2 games against San Diego this year. He has 48.5 DraftKings points and 37.2 DraftKings points. The 37.2 DraftKings points was his last start. Complete game, 4-hitter, 1 run, 8 strikeouts against this Padres team. And the first game, I think his numbers were even better. So, San Diego has been basically unable to touch this guy. And I think he pitched 2 complete games against them, 18 innings, 2 complete games, given up like 1 run, less than 10 hits in 2 games, struck out like, 17 batters. So, there's really nothing you can knock about Cueto here. I think he pitches another good game against the San Diego team. I don't think all of a sudden in the last 5 days, San Diego found out how to hit left-handed pitching. And we saw him pitch against them twice already this season, and they didn't figure him out from the first time to the second time. So I don't expect them to figure him out now. Cueto looked good in that last game. Cueto's feeling good. He's pitching pretty well this year. And honestly, he's absolutely owned San Diego this year. So I'm not going to use any of the bats on San Diego. I think Cueto is a viable pitching option, but for my money, I'd rather pay up for Kershaw, and then I don't think you can afford to pay up for both of them. So I've actually been coming down to some cheaper options for my second starting pitcher. If you can figure out a way to put Cueto and Kershaw in there and you can get some bats with upside, I think those 2 guys are both going to give you 30-plus fantasy points today. So you're going to wind up with a floor of 60 or 70 fantasy points in your cash games. But again, you're only going to be leaving yourself like $22,000, $23,000 to get 8 bats in there, which is less than $3,000 a bat, which is not an easy thing to accomplish unless we get some, extreme value that we have to play today. Now, on the other side of this game, Drew Pomeranz has been just as good, if not better. He's been an absolute beast in 2016. 1.96 ERA, 1.07 WHIP, 56 strikeouts in 46 innings pitched. For left-handed bats are hitting 170 against him. Right-handed bats are hitting 180. There's really nothing you can say about this kid. He's been one of the best young pitchers in baseball to start the season here. Looking at this San Francisco team, if I'm using anybody against him, it's going to be Buster Posey. Posey has a 377 WOBA and a 192 ISO against left-handed pitching. More importantly, he's already 6 of 10 lifetime against Pomeranz with 2 home runs. So obviously this is one of the top BVP plays of the day that you're going to hear people talking about. You know, I like Pomeranz. The kid has been good, and he's been even better this year than he had been in the past when he gave up most of those hits to Posey. But, you know, 6 or 10 with 2 home runs from a guy who has a 377 WOBA and just a tick below a 200 ISO, it is something you have to pay attention to. The only other guy who stands out on the numbers, Kelby Tomlinson, who hit in the 3rd spot yesterday against the lefty, or Saturday against the lefty. If he's hitting in the 3rd spot again today, he's a very cheap second base shortstop option. 396 WOBA, 128 ISO score. I do think he's another guy that you can look at. So Tomlinson and Posey would be the 2 guys that I'd want to have some exposure to. And that pretty much wraps it up for our Benny's Bats edition today. You know, we went through each game and all the matchups that we have here. Like I said, I like that Pomeranz-Cueto matchup. I think you can look at pitchers on both sides there. You know, Kershaw is obviously going to be the stud of the day. You know, Velasquez is in a good spot. Rich Hill's in a good spot. So we got some pitching options. We have 9 games. There's also some gas cans on the mound. So we do have some nice hitting options and guys we can target as well. So good luck putting it all together and coming up with a big roster tonight. Thank you guys for joining us here at rotocurve.com. And as always, stay classy, DFS.